In this video, I'll discuss the peer review process and why it's okay to be mad for a little while, but get over it. Peer review matters. It's an important process that makes science science. If we just wrote whatever we felt like writing and published it, that's fiction, which is cool, but it's not science. More eyes matter. The more folks read what you write and the more folks contribute to your thought process, the stronger the manuscript is. Remember, this isn't peer review in the sense of your high school buddies or your college friends reading your work and saying it's awesome. It's a process that's intended to give you critical feedback so that the entire manuscript is stronger. Yes, there are issues with this, but as a whole, it's important to know that your peers are the giants in the field, or people who are well-trained, as good as you or better, sometimes a little worse. So it's important to get that feedback so that the final manuscript is a strong manuscript that can contribute to science. Who are these peers? They could be people who are like you. They're trained in the same discipline or subdiscipline or series of methods. They might be a little adjacent to you. Now, there should be a match. They should know enough about your method to comment on it, or they should have substantive expertise. So often you'll get lots of different reviewers with lots of different perspectives. For example, you might get a reviewer that's more of a methodologist, and they're really looking at how did the author of this piece come to their conclusions? What do the methods tell me? It's important for folks to really get into the weeds because it's the only opportunity that someone other than the authors will really begin to evaluate the contribution from a methodological standpoint, because we've seen that when this doesn't happen, bad science happens, retractions happen. Things that we know shouldn't happen when there isn't oversight or when this oversight is ignored. Peers aren't clones of you. They're not identical copies. They have their own varied experiences in the type of work that you're doing. So it's important to keep in mind that your peers might be trained a little differently, but that difference is what makes the manuscript stronger. We might want to antagonize the peer review process or antagonize the peers. That's generally a fruitless exercise because these are people that, even if they're mean, can help the manuscript be better. Peers do a number of different things that are important. They evaluate your contribution. Now, sometimes contribution gets mixed up for filling a gap. We're not masons. We don't fill gaps in masonry. What we do is we contribute to the overall scholarship of our discipline. And we do that by ensuring that what we do contributes to it. There should be some new understanding, some interesting finding, something that overall contributes in a way where someone reads it and says, oh, now I know something new that I didn't know before. That's what a contribution is. The other side of that is sometimes scholars with substantive expertise might contribute. This might mean that they have a deep understanding of the theory or the literature that you're hoping to contribute to. Occasionally, the reviewer you get is the warm body that said yes to the email. These contributions might not be super helpful, but that doesn't mean they're not impactful. You still need to listen to them. The peer review process, remember, is primarily a mechanism to ensure only good science goes through and to give the authors of a publication feedback, mostly critical feedback. Very few people say, you did an awesome job, just publish this immediately. That tends not to happen. Instead, you'll get people who vary from being candid to being jerks. That's really the range. They're either candid and saying, hey, fix these things, or they're jerks about it and still telling you to fix those things. Your response when you get that initial feedback should be to read it, skim it, put it away, and have whatever emotional reaction you would like to have. So once you're done crying, screaming, breaking things, whatever helps, honestly. Maybe you go to one of those rooms where you just break a bunch of stuff. That would be a viable response to some of the feedback that you get. But it's important for you to feel those feelings and then to move on. Because often in the manuscript writing process, there's this moment of arrested development where someone gets critical feedback and they totally shut down. And then they don't respond to that feedback for weeks or months. Once you've reacted, pull that review back up and now read it, ideally with some more distance. The initial feelings you have will still be there, but you'll notice that there'll be more distance between them. You might go back and say, okay, that person was a jerk, but did they actually have a point that I should listen to, or I should read, or I should revise to? And sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes people are really rude, but once you dig past that, The points they make are valid, and you should respond to them. So reread all of the feedback and begin to build your mental model for how you wish to respond to that. Now, one thing that is important to know in this process is that your response could be one of three. It could be a total reject, which means you're not responding to anything. They just don't want it. And that's okay. Move on quickly. It could be revise and resubmit. Sometimes it's reject, revise and resubmit, which means they don't like it at its current form, but you get a chance to revise it and try again. And then occasionally, once in a blue moon, you'll just get an accept. It's never happened once in my career where I just get a manuscript accepted as is. It always goes through some sort of revision. One of the things that happens during the peer review process is you write a letter that says, hey, here's my response to all of the reviews. And the more organized that letter, the easier time the editor has to make a decision. So organize it for them. The first thing that you should keep in mind when you're responding is to have a timeline. You want to say by the end of this period of time, ideally weeks, not months, you will submit a response. But once you've done the processing, build out a timeline. How many things do you have to revise? And the best way, in my view, to do that is to copy and paste all of the reviews and begin to sort. So you can sort them by reviewer, and then within the reviewer, sort them by content. Sometimes you'll get reviewers who are basically just editors. They'll find all the punctuation and grammar that you got wrong. So in your response, you can say that, they wanted a period here, there should be a semicolon here, there's some sort of weird clause over here. And you just very quickly say you addressed all of them so that you're not spending a lot of time doing it, but by flagging that you've actually done it, you're being responsive to the feedback. And that's the key. Be responsive to the feedback. More substantive responses will take a little bit more. So it's still important to organize them within a reviewer and attend to each one. There will be some that you flat out disagree with. This person is wrong. There'll be others where you think about it and you're like, well, okay, I could make these changes. It's not going to fundamentally change my manuscript. Once you organize it by reviewer and by each individual comment, it's basically a list. You can then tackle it like a list. You could find the things that are fairly straightforward. Fix all of the grammar, fix all the things that are simple. And that way you're maintaining momentum. And remember, you should have collaborators. So farm out some of this work. Say, hey, you did this analysis, address this point, please. Once you've done this process of revising and resubmitting, it's time to wait. And how long you wait really depends on a number of factors that are unfortunately outside of your control. But there are still some general guidelines. If it's over 90 days, that's probably been too long. If it's within 30, you should wait at least 30, sometimes 60. Granted, all of these timelines are field dependent, and each journal, even within a field, will have their own internal timelines. Some are efficient, some are woefully inefficient. So have patience and be ready to respond. But also be assertive if you feel that things are taking a little too long. It's perfectly fine to pull a manuscript if you feel it's taking too long. It's also perfectly fine to nudge an editor and say, hey, where is this along in the process? Now keep in mind that that strategy of nudging an editor is easier if you were also responsive. The peer review process is frankly annoying, but necessary. What are some bullshit that you deal with? What are some things that you've dealt with? Comment below so others can hear your horror stories or read them. You read horror stories. I guess you could hear them.